said he was going to be making internet.
Okay, recording has started. Dan, Steve, Reese are in the room as far as commissioners.
Oh, Dan, okay.
Hi,
Very
Joe.
good. Hello. I'll be there next time, hopefully. All right. Well, why don't we get this meeting started? Let's bring this meeting to order. So the March 3rd, 2026 Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting taking place in the Senior Community Center boardroom and on Zoom online. This meeting is being recorded. First item will be roll call. Uh, Steve Moore,
Present.
Dan Warshall,
Here.
Julie Gottfredson,
Here.
Barb Riley,
Here.
Janet Daisley,
Here.
Reese Champitti,
Here.
and the chair is here. All right, first item on the agenda is 20 Henry Graff Road. Sports Medicine North requests for a certificate of compliance.
Yeah, so just to remind the commissioners, Jarrett Landman came maybe about a month ago, a couple of meetings ago, and the outstanding, he got, or the commission issued a partial certificate of completion at that time, or a certificate of compliance rather, for the aspects of this project that were the building itself and the paved areas, but there's still, the commission had requested some additional information about efforts that have been made in the past several years to treat the invasives on site. So Jared, I have some of the new documents you submitted ready to go, but feel free to tell me if there's anything particular you want pulled up to display.
Well, the most recent document I think is the most important one, and I don't know if she has joined yet because unfortunately I can't see. But at the request of this commission, I contracted Weston Sampson as an independent field ecologist to come out, review all of the previous work and field notes from Parterre, the invoices and documents which I've uploaded from Peroni showing the continuation of the invasive species treatment along with the original order of conditions and handoff from Tom Hughes's original consultative notes to Parterre. And so a memorandum was created after reviewing the documents and making a site visit by Devin Herrick, who was their wetlands scientist. And that was uploaded last week for the board to review. And she was going to be on this call to speak to it. I know she sent me a calendar invite, so I don't know if we have the ability to give her a couple minutes here.
I'm
Um,
here, Jarrett.
oh, hi. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. I can't see myself or anybody else, and so my apologies for that. And so I don't know if that document can be retrieved and brought up. If not, I am happy to share it if there's a way for me to share here as Devin's talking through it.
I'm not sure if we have the ability to drop things into the chat. I haven't seen that new document, but I can go on OpenGov quickly to pull that up.
Okay.
Perhaps in the meantime, I can introduce myself to the commission. I'm hoping everyone is able to hear me clearly. My name is Devin Herrick. I'm a certified wetland scientist with Weston and Sampson. And we, as Jarrett kindly introduced, we were contracted to take a look at the documentation associated with the invasive species treatment that's occurred on site and just kind of provide a few conclusions based on what we had seen thus far and the compliance with the order of conditions.
Okay.
Okay, so taking a look here, is it this memorandum here?
Right now, I
Um,
continue to just see the field notes. I can't quite see.
Oh, I see. Let me download this to PDF and then you'll be able to see it. Are you able to see this now?
Yes.
Memorandum. Okay.
that's the one.
Okay, so
Perhaps
I didn't notice that there had been a new upload, so the commission has not seen this, and neither have I, but feel free to talk us through it, but just know that we have not had the chance to review it yet.
Absolutely understood. Maybe I can just talk you through the sections that we reviewed and just kind of the conclusions real quick, but be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have based on what I was able to review. So the memorandum outlines the items that we were provided, including the approved treatment methodology, which I believe was developed by Hughes Environmental Consulting as part of their invasive removal and control plan. We went through and took a look at what approved treatment methodologies were outlined also in the order of conditions. And so in particular, that looks as though that there was 2 years of treatment that was asked for, as well as some permit closeout criteria and ongoing maintenance. We were then able to also take a look at the construction and treatment timeline that occurred on site and those documented treatment efforts based on the ecological field notes provided by Parterre during the 2022 and 2023 field season. There's also some receipts from additional treatments that occurred from a local landscape company in the following 2 years, 2024 and 2025. Also took a look at the compliance with the order of conditions and that approved treatment methodology, where the conclusions kind of landed based on the documentation that we were able to review is that the 2022 to 2023 2 years of invasives management was compliant with the approved methodologies that was outlined in the order of conditions. It appears to have been completed based on the notes provided by Parterre. There was also 2 additional years of treatment, 2024 and 2025, that had more limited documentation, but it does seem that the applicant has been aggressively treating those invasives on site for 4 years, which is beyond the scope of what was committed to in that approved management plan. We did note that despite the treatment efforts, the site is still not 95% free of invasives, in particular Phragmites. There's some stands that would likely inhibit non-target vegetative growth. I am local to the area, so I was able to take a quick drive around and just get some eyes on the area. One particular item that we noted, you'll see there's a map on page 5, is that all of the parcels that also surround this particular parcel have some Phragmites issues as well. And so we had noted that it's, in our opinion, that continued annual maintenance in accordance with the approved plan would be beneficial in limiting future growth of invasives on site to the maximum extent practicable. However, absent a broader invasive species management program within the larger industrial park to address some of those infestations, achieving a 95% invasive-free condition is probably not realistic. And that was mimicked in the approved treatment memorandum, and it was noted by Hughes as well in the item that was approved by the commission as part of the order of conditions. With that, I realize you folks didn't get a chance to take a look, but I'd be happy to discuss any of the documents I was given a chance to review.
Thank you very much for walking us through that. I'll leave it to the commission members if anyone has any questions about this document or any of the previous documents.
I guess my question would be if we were to stop the annual maintenance, in your best guess, how long would it take for the Phragmites to take over completely when the areas are now relatively Phragmites free?
Sure. It's hard to say, but I would say within a couple of years, you would probably see a fairly good encroachment in areas that were free. I will say that the current property owner, which I did include in the memorandum, and I apologize for not mentioning, the current property owner is committed to continuing the ongoing annual maintenance component as was specified in the treatment plan by Hughes. I believe the exact language was annual maintenance will control invasive species through hand pulling or targeted herbicide application. Phragmites will be cut at approximately 3 feet in height with larger or persistent stands treated using approved methods, and that would be annually moving forward beyond the certificate of compliance, and the property owner is willing to continue that ongoing maintenance. So it's something we would suggest just to try to keep at bay as much as possible those invasives that are present.
And again, just to reiterate, and I believe it was uploaded to the site, but I'm also happy to send it around. I do have a signed letter from the new owner stating just that they will keep up with the historical treatments of these of the property as we have in the past.
Okay, anybody else have any questions, concerns?
I just have a question about what it would look like to have a industrial park management program. Asking the consultant here, based on what you saw around the industrial park for invasives, or at least for Phragmites,
Yeah,
what would that look like?
absolutely. It can certainly be a challenge. This isn't something unique to Newburyport. Of course, Phragmites is a big challenge statewide. Some of it depends on your local bylaws. If you allow herbicide treatment, or if you, which I presume you do, given the treatment methodology that was approved, it can be a challenge because you need to get all those property owners on board unless it's something that the city is willing to allocate budget for. We generally recommend starting with something like a feasibility study that someone could put together to try and get an estimate on how much area you're actually talking about being treated. If you're talking about all the species that are on the Massachusetts invasive list, or if you're really just trying to focus in on Phragmites, since that one is particularly aggressive. It can take a lot of forms, in the form of herbicide. It can be in the form of a mowing regime. Like a lot of landfills have mowing regimes associated with Phragmites. A lot just depends on what those property owners in the local area are open to.
Yeah, that would be a big project in the
Yeah.
industrial park, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't see the city coming up with the money
No.
and getting all the property owners to commit to that would be quite a task. But certainly worthy of trying, maybe.
Interesting idea.
Well, we can always try it, but the owner is committed to continuing in this
Yeah.
property, so that's a start.
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else? Any other concerns? Questions?
Well, I guess so we agreed on the partial certificate a couple of meetings ago, knowing that we would go out in the spring and see what was happening with plants, and more than likely issue the complete certificate. So I'm not quite sure what we're expected to do tonight.
I think the applicant was hoping to have a complete certificate of compliance issued tonight, but that's of course up to the commission. Those who are comfortable doing so versus waiting for springtime conditions.
I guess the only other question then is, because again, the wildflower in the uploaded documents, it does show the original wildflower plantings, the Lomo fescue, all the things, the baby trees that were all called upon initially to be planted is documented. I guess if we want to set any sort of assurances around their current viability in the spring, is there an opportunity to, again, because we have the backing of the future owner stating that they will keep up with the recommendations of the order of conditions of the property, is there a possibility to get that certificate of completion and then somehow have some sign off stating that if the findings of the wildflower mix has not survived the initial planting, that a replanting would occur? Is there some way to document that for your satisfaction to be able to obtain that certificate?
Could I comment on that? I would say the way I feel about that, I understand where you're going with that. But once the commission votes to issue the complete certificate of compliance, we can't really add new conditions such as that. there can be perpetual conditions in a certificate of compliance if they're brought over from the original order of conditions, such as, the applicant shall maintain or continue to cut invasive species in accordance with the invasive species management plan, et cetera. But to add something new like that, they would put an onus on a new property owner that wasn't party to this original order of conditions, I think is something that we can't do through the order of conditions process. So if that's where the commission feels comfortable, then I would say we need to wait until the spring to actually see whether or not those plants do need to be replaced. I don't think
But
we
then
can.
to that original point, and I don't mean to cut you off,
Yeah.
but to that original point, if the order of conditions was in 2021 to make the spring plantings, and we have documentation of that, why would
Mhm.
we held to a different standard then that
Hmm.
it have to have survivability in 2025, right?
Right. So that was going to be my next question. If they were planted in, you said 2021 and been
21
monitored.
and 2. I have
Okay.
I have to go back to the ecological field notes to find the exact.
And so is there evidence that they survived 2 growing seasons? Did the photographs that we have on record show that they
Good
were
question.
viable back here, at the latest photos taken in 2025?
That is a good question. I will have to let me find. I'd have to go through the dates, but
Because that would solve it right there if you had some sort of photographic.
yeah.
Right, and that would be, yeah, we would need that, but also we got the letter from Weston and Sampson just today. None of us has seen it.
Fair enough.
So at least to maybe delay until the 17th to see if you can come up with dated photos and all that, but we still need to look at that the letter.
Okay. I would certainly be comfortable with that.
Anybody else?
No, that sounds like a good plan.
Okay. So I guess I think we don't have anything else for them, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe get a continuance until the 17th and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'll make a motion to continue to March 17th.
Second?
All right, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Worshaw,
Yes.
Julie Goffredson,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
Reese Champitti.
Yes.
Wow, when was the last time I went through an entire 7 people on this? And I vote yes.
Been a long time.
All righty, well, thank you. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Appreciate it,
time.
Commission. Appreciate your time, Devin. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Okay, the next item is the emergency cert for putting snow in the Merrimack River.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Danny Port. We have Kim Turner here with us as well from the Department of Public Services. So feel free to, I guess, maybe leave it to Kim to give a quick introduction or comments from her end if she'd like.
Thanks, Sandy. Yes, so thank you all for your time tonight. We did request this emergency authorization. We actually reached out to the DEP shortly after the very first storm we had early in February, which dumped about 30 inches of snow on the city, to find out what the process was to expedite this emergency certification. After this last storm, the nor'easter, it became clearer and clearer that we needed this authorization expedited. So I worked with Director Port, and we put together some documentation and paperwork, and a letter was submitted to Kelsey and Andy, sort of explaining the situation. So where we're at is we had to utilize quite a bit of the space at Cashman Park for snow storage after the first large storm earlier last month. We sort of maxed out the amount of space that we could use in that area and shifted our snow storage over to Cherry Hill. Our parks manager has authorization in emergency situations to allow snow storage over at Cherry Hill during situations like these. That areas has a license agreement with the Newburyport Youth Soccer Association, so they were notified as well. And in the interim, we got all of our documentation put together with Director Port and Kelsey as well, to expedite this emergency certification form. And I will say that we have been able to, we spent about 5 days last week hauling the snow into the Merrimack. And just to let you know, the way that operation works, there's a truck mounted snow blower that drives down the streets and shoots the snow into the back of a dump truck. So we're not actually scraping the roadways. That snow blower is not able to get down to pavement. So the snow is, relatively clean as opposed to just scraping and dumping into the river. That's not the operation as it works in this situation. We were able to time the hauling to an outgoing tide to try to minimize the impact. And I think that's the gist of sort of what the operations are. I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
Chair, could I just jump in there for a moment?
Yes. Yep.
Just wanted to clarify one of the things that we've had a discussion about, obviously a little bit before that, I know there was discussion about, and we've talked about since then, is just because this is something that, for obvious reasons might come up on a recurring basis or might happen depending on the seasonality and the intensity of storms. It made sense to look at, essentially in the more formal sense that DEP looks at this, having a report at least that clarifies, essentially that all options have been exhausted to use landside locations and whatnot. So clearly the intent here is to, we're only talking about clean snow as opposed to tow the snow that's picked up other materials and whatnot. But again, in order to minimize any alteration or disruption of the environment, the general expectation, I think, going forward is that prior to the next season, the Office of Planning Development with the conservation agent would be able to have a discussion with DPS and put together a little bit more of an assessment of that and a plan and protocol to essentially make sure, again, I'm certainly familiar with all city properties and the extent of limitations of space that they have at different facilities, but to have a better record of that sort of thing if there is in fact going to be another emergency cert, for situations like this. Certainly we didn't want to impede public safety, that is paramount, but and I think DEP recognizes that, but they also want to make sure that we've exhausted all options. So we've sort of agreed that we need to put something together of that nature, if anything of it like this will be revisited. So thank you.
Okay.
So are you currently dumping snow at Cherry Hill?
The Cherry Hill area has been exhausted. We brought as much snow over there as we felt comfortable. And again, we were then able to shift away from Cherry Hill to reduce the piles at Cashman. And now they are going back to hauling snow at Cashman as sort of another storage area. So we are done at this point, unless there's another large storm, which I really hope there is not. We are done with the operations of hauling snow into the Merrimack at this point.
Because I don't know if Kelsey uploaded the stuff to OpenGov or not, but there was a bunch of stuff there where to get the emergency cert, you have to have exhausted like all upland options, which I guess we have. But also, dumping at Cashman, it's kind of like dumping it in the river, because when that snow melts, it's all going right into the river. So maybe that's not the best place to dump snow in the first place.
Well, it is the most central. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, at least when the snow melts there, all of the suspended solids will end up in the parking lot, as we've all observed in the past when they've done it. In April, that is a big pile of dirt.
Right, but the oil and stuff might.
I don't disagree, but I wonder, we've exhausted all other opportunities to dump upland. I mean, I wonder if there might be. What about the old Crow Lane where the fire was? There's a huge lot back there that seems like it would be a viable option. Had that been considered?
Do you mean where the recycling center is?
The old past the current composting area, the back lot. That's no
There-
longer being used for
That's
composting?
right, but that's being used for storage for DPS materials up there. There's curbing and other roadway materials being stored up there.
There's also a very nearby wetland. So,
There's
Right.
that too.
um,
Just for administrative, I guess, awareness, I shared this in OpenGov, but, I'm happy to share it via email to the commissioners going forward in the future. DEP does have guidance about, emergency certifications, but specifically with snow removal. I think Kim and Andy just hit, most of the points. It's basically exhausting upland storage and then ensuring the snow is of the highest quality possible, which Kim spoke to. And I think the intent the planning office has going forward is to kind of have the kind of things we're discussing now verbally written, uh, so that the commission would have kind of questions and answers to refer to and facts that they could make their decision on. And that document would be an attachment to the emergency certificate. And it would be updated, it'd be kind of a living document going forward. Kim, one thing I forgot to ask you about when you were out in my office today, I know DEP had brought up the issue of maybe needing to get like an endangered species emergency authorization, or at least checking in with Mass Wildlife. Is there any update on that aspect of things?
I don't have an update on that tonight. My understanding from just our initial back and forth emails was that there were not endangered species in that area, so it was not something I pursued further, but I'm happy to do that for future.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did cross my mind until this evening when I was looking through some of this guidance, but I think that will be something that we'll include in that kind of ready to go package.
Sure. There are sturgeon.
Yeah, there are sturgeon up around there, but
Right, I think in the future, probably the process will include getting a sign off from Mass Wildlife of some kind, even if it's, not strictly a MISA review, just kind of an awareness. But yeah, that was something I forgot to bring up earlier today. The special conditions, Andy, and I'd like to thank Andy and Kim for handling this when I was unexpectedly out last week. Yeah, so this section D, this is a standard state form for commissioners who haven't maybe seen this process before. The special conditions go here. And what's happening is in my absence, Andy signed this certification form because I was away and because of the time urgency. And it's valid only if the commission ratifies it, which is simple majority vote. And once it's ratified, it's in effect. It would be in effect for 30 days. In this case, the emergency is over. So it's definitely within that 30-day for now. So if 30 days passes and another snow emergency came up, and hopefully not, but it would require a new certificate. It's not like this lasts all season, or it has a 30-day expiration date. But the question before the commission now is whether you'd ratify this certification that was issued last week.
So I have one other question. Kim, is it in DPS's plans in the future to use that snow blower so that it's clean snow rather than scrapings?
You mean in future seasons?
Yeah.
So it's not a piece of machinery that the city owns. It's something that we contract out. But I know it worked really well this season with the sheer amount of snow that we had. So I would imagine moving forward, it would be something we would be interested in contracting again.
Yeah, my only complaint is they went by my house at 1 o'clock in the morning. I can deal with that.
take one for the team,
Do
Steve.
But
That
you know,
question
the
is
issue
about,
the issue with regard to scraping is that all that snow was scraped off the pavement by plows, pushed to the side, and then, you're not really avoiding
Yeah.
the scraping, you've scraped it, then you've picked it up with a snow blower.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that it really makes any difference.
We can hope.
I have a question, just historically, have we done this before? Like, back in 2015 when we had like twice as much snow? Did we do it back then?
My understanding
Julia,
is
you
that you
could,
did.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that was the first time I think that the state had to deal with this level and DEP. I remember was addressing it because Boston, it was a nightmare in Boston
Yeah.
and they had to get rid of stuff. So
Yeah.
We did do it back then. One of my questions was, and I don't know whether we got this information, but are the communities upstream from us dumping their snow into the river also?
They are. I know Marblehead is, and I believe Gloucester is as well.
Okay, but like upstream on the Merrimack?
Oh, that I don't know.
Lawrence, I think Lawrence
Yeah,
is.
Lawrence, I'm just wondering because it sort of changes the calculus in some ways in terms of what's being put into the river, and if we could see how they're doing it, I would just be curious. I know we did do this
Well,
back
it's
in.
a good point, actually. I would say we probably, Kim, should follow up with a little bit of other communities and see what they're doing, because either case, we would need to revisit this even for a subsequent season if this were to come up. So we should
Right.
really be looking at the best practices, but whether it's the
Yeah.
properties or the techniques they use to kind of make sure it's the cleanest snow if they have to, put it in the river.
Yeah, and in addition to potentially monitor any impacts. So if we start seeing somehow a lot more sediment in the river or washing up or chunks of pavement on the side of the riverbanks, whatever, that we know who to attribute that to. Was that us or is it likely that there's stuff coming from downstream as well? Whether we're getting more oils and whatever contaminants we see coming down the river. Be nice to know whether or not that could be coming from dumping snow upstream or whether it's not as big of a problem as we might imagine.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
okay, what else, folks? Any other questions or comments?
So I just wanted to clarify that the operation is done. There's no more dumping of snow in the river at this point.
So long as we don't have another storm, then yes, we are done.
Okay.
It might be worth having like a best management practice for this, based on, what other cities are doing and I guess available technology. Like if the snow blower is the best way to handle it, maybe that's written into the contracts to require it.
I think in Boston, in Malta.
Yeah, they have like snow farms. I'm happy, going forward to kind of reach out to our DEP contact and other agents in upstream towns and kind of try to gather what people are doing as far as storage and also, mechanically, how are they getting snow to the river?
I will say one thing, we did look into melting and it is an extremely expensive process.
Hmm.
Yeah, they
That's what I
had
was-
those big melting trucks in, I think they brought from Canada or something in 2015. And
That's right.
When they melt it, is it sort of like the way you'd have a dewatering operation? Do they have an area and they surround it with erosion controls and melt it and just let it drain into storm drains? Or do they have like frac tank? Like, how are they melting this?
I
Curious.
suspect it is melted and goes directly into a drain. Not sure, but
I don't know.
that.
I will say for here, it was to melt at Cashman Park.
At Cashman.
Yeah,
Okay.
we wouldn't be bringing that kind of equipment through the neighborhoods. There'd be too
Right.
much risk.
So in which case you're not really solving any water quality issues in terms of the Merrimack River or water supplies or aquifers or whatever. You're really just speeding up the process of moving snow.
Correct.
So it's not necessarily helping water quality at all.
right, well, it could help a bit if you're dumping the water into an area that has at least wattles around it and
Treatment.
everything.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
at least get a lot of that stuff out of it, and the water will go through.
Yeah, it's worth noting given the catchment drainage areas of the city, a lot of this ends up in the Merrimack, anyway. I think there's certain systems, obviously, that we have in between the river and where it's coming from in the streets that can help along the way. And obviously, we want to take advantage of those. But at the end of the day, it is ultimately a lot of this, the streets that we have will and eventually end up dumping their water down to the Merrimack at the end of the day.
Okay, well, it's done now, so I think if we can can we do our own conditions on something like this for future, or do
Yeah,
we
I think it
just
would make sense to the extent the commission wants to, just memorialize, certainly I had put a stipulation in the description above about the clean snow, but I think any of the other elements that you're concerned about here, I think it behooves all of us to have a follow-up in advance of any other, further scenario like this. But I do think it was sort of warranted in the context here, the urgency of the timing and the public safety access needed on the streets. But I do think on a go-forward basis, we should, in terms of exhausting spaces, there's business parking lots. We could try to work with some private partners to find some other areas that are outside the city's property, for instance. But again, giving more time for us to look at that with the Department of Public Services, I think you could certify this, but stipulate a few other, provisos if you feel appropriate.
yeah, because this is probably going to keep happening into the future, and if we have a best management practice procedure set up, then it might
Yeah,
be.
again, in terms of like techniques, I mean, again, I don't want to speak for public services or other departments, their properties, but I mean, looking at whether it be field areas or parking lots that are expansive in the business park, for instance, I think a lot of those being underutilized, given the time of year, if there's, a way to work out some other spaces that doesn't allow or require them to have that emergency dumping in the river, then it would just give us, we'd be one step ahead if should it happen again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I know a long time ago when I worked at GE, the city of Lynn had an agreement with GE to use some of their open lots, to put snow for the same reason. So maybe like working some partnerships, would be a good thing to do preemptively, to prevent even having to do an emergency certification.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I think Rochester Electronics has some parking lots that don't get overutilized.
True. There is that. All right. So, it seems to me like we have a motion for this.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to ratify the emergency certification.
Second,
All right. Roll call. Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Julie Godfredson,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
yes.
Reese Champitti,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. Thank you, Kim and Andy.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one more quick question? Is there any sediment control around the pile down at Cashman currently?
I don't believe so.
Is that something you would be willing to look into, seeing if that's something that can be implemented?
Yeah, I can talk to the team about that and see if if that's possible or not.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful. I agree with Dan on that. Just, I know we haven't necessarily done it in the past, but given the amount of snow there right now, and what we know is in there, if it all melts really fast, which it might, given the upcoming sort of weather forecast, or if it rains on top of it, like a lot of that is just going to wash right out. But if you had even just the straw wattles around there, that would slow it down and stop a lot of the heavier, yuckier stuff, sediment from going into the river.
Or a silt sock if that's easier, whatever.
Yeah, silt
Yeah,
sock.
Perhaps
yeah.
getting easier.
Exactly.
Yeah, that could be
It's
very easy.
they're not that expensive, and at least the wattles aren't all that expensive, and they do a fairly good job.
I'll look into
Okay.
that tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. next up is 5 Basin Street. They have requested a continuance, Kelsey.
Yeah, that just came in this afternoon. So the city has new legal counsel. They have been provided with the 5 Basin Street documents, but they still need some time to review. I think they are planning to attend the March 17th meeting, if not at least provide written comments. So the applicant and Tom Hughes and Lisa kind of wanted to wait for that. So they've continued to March 17th.
Yeah, and they'll likely be online, but I think in this context here, with where we have attorney providing one side of the discussion, irrespective of where you land on this, it seems reasonable for you to also have counsel present. So while they might have given you some guidance beforehand on the issue, certainly there might be follow-up questions or nuances that you want to talk about. So it seemed to make sense in this case that it's not just a written response to the questions maybe that sort of come up, but actually being there also to follow through in your discussion with the applicant.
Okay.
And Kelsey, you said you found the old plans?
I found, yeah, I didn't have a chance to review all of them, but I'll mention Steve had asked about, if we had records of the deck at 5 Basin Street being permitted originally, because it's not mentioned at all right in their Chapter 91
Right.
license.
Yeah, the Chapter 91 license doesn't mention the deck or the vertical boards.
So I found in some of our old computer files, that's definitely not a complete record, but kind of scattered site plans and a couple old permits. It seems like the deck might even pre-exist. These are from 2001 and 2004. It seems like the deck might have already been there, but I am going to upload those they're too big to send via email. So by tomorrow, I'm going to have those uploaded somewhere in OpenGov, and I can share with all the commission in case you're looking at like kind of historical records of 5 Basin Street.
So the deck couldn't have been there when they built the revetment because you have to remove the deck to fix the revetment.
Well, I think Tom, I spoke to him briefly on the phone, and I think he said that the deck had been replaced already in the past. I'm not sure. I'm also going to share these documents with him. But I prepared him, I kind of gave him the heads up that the commission may be interested in digging into or understanding how that deck got to be there in the first place and what approvals were obtained. So I did find some documents, but I haven't done a thorough read through yet.
Joe, maybe you
Thank
could
you,
look at
Kelsey.
aerial photographs.
No problem.
Maybe I can look at what?
You could look at old aerial photographs and see when the.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just thinking of that.
Yeah, that's a really
I
good
found,
idea.
The 2001 aerial photography, unfortunately, is so blurry. It's almost not usable, but I'll include that too.
Okay.
That'll be super helpful. Thank you.
So I'll make a
Alrighty.
motion to continue
Okay.
at 5 Basin Street.
Will that
Second.
be until 17th?
So March 17th, yes.
I second the motion.
All right, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Julie Gottfredson,
Yes.
Barb Riley. Was that a yes, Barb?
Yes.
There we go. Janet Daisley,
Yes.
Reese Champitti,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, on to the Artichoke Reservoir alum treatment. Notice of intent.
So I think we have Laura Deemer online, and Pete King, the water superintendent, is here in person. And I'll just say briefly, I think it was Janet and Barbara and I who did the site visit. There wasn't really much to see because it was snowy. And I don't think anyone was able to make the other walkthrough you had. But I think what we discussed mostly during that site visit was what the staging of the equipment might look like. But in any case, I will hand it over to Laura and Pete. And if there's any particular part of the plan or any other document you want me to pull up, please just let me know.
I think if Laura can introduce it, I can kind of go over the nuts and bolts of where the equipment will most likely be staged when we do the treatment itself.
Okay, that sounds good. Laura, are you able, I think I gave you permissions to speak, but let me know if you have any technical issues.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, thanks thanks to the commissioners for hearing us tonight. So yes, this is what you're looking at here is the alum treatment plan that we developed for the upper and lower Artichoke reservoirs. This is a treatment that we hope to apply in early May of this year to set us up well for the coming season and hopefully at least 3 more seasons into the future. So this came at a bit of an urgency. It's documented in this plan, and actually the cover photo that you see in front of you is an example of the reservoirs in a bloom form. So the bloom is composed of cyanobacteria. For those that may be unfamiliar with cyanobacteria, it is like a photosynthetic bacteria, and it's a major concern for drinking water sources because it has the potential to release harmful toxins. And in last year's case, we had a fairly continuous bloom in the areas of the reservoir that you actually see in this photo you're looking at for about 3, if not 4 months through the season. We were doing regular toxin testing in the raw and finished water, and we were finding elevated levels of saxitoxin, and we were closely monitoring that but it was higher than background levels because of the blooms here. Historically, the city has managed these blooms with copper sulfate treatments. The copper acts to lyse or break open cells and collapse blooms. That has worked in the past, but there's been a pattern of the increasing need each year for these treatments. And in 2025, the city needed 6 of these copper sulfate treatments. And then even then, the bloom was showing resistance and not responding well unless the copper sulfate dose was increased. So this is not a sustainable solution for the reservoirs. There's a lot of issues with copper sulfate itself. It's not a technique that should be used on a regular basis. It's really just intended for emergency applications. What we're proposing here uses aluminum compounds dosed in a way that when it's applied to the reservoirs and settles through the water column, it can bind with a key nutrient for cyanobacteria growth, phosphorus. And when it settles into the sediment, it can further bind up the phosphorus so that it's no longer available for cyanobacteria and other types of algae to grow into bloom conditions like you see here. Kelsey, if you could, it might be helpful to go to, if you go to page 20, well, it's PDF 25 or page 21 in the document, whichever is easiest for you to find.
Is it this?
Yes. Just to give you a sense for, how we're planning to break the treatment up. So there's 5 primary zones. You'll notice zone 3 actually has 2 parts because it's above and below Plumber Spring Bridge. So we have section 3A and 3B. They'll be treated with the same dose, but obviously there's some logistics that are being sorted out with, the barge access between those 2 zones. So the treatment itself will still need to be negotiated a bit with the contractor who's selected for this, as far as how many days the treatment will actually proceed. My proposed plan in this treatment plan to maintain not only ecological integrity, but also managing, what can actually be realistically done by the contractor and the types of equipment that they have. So it'll likely be around 10 days of total treatment over like a 2-week period, aiming for the first 2 weeks of May of this year. And that timing is pretty critical because these are shallow reservoirs. So they do have fairly dense aquatic vegetation that grows, and we really want to apply this before the plants really start to reestablish for the season. This allows for good flock formation as the compounds are added, and rapid settling into the sediments. Yeah, I could keep going, but I think I'm happy to answer any specific questions, or I could talk more about, or Pete could too, about maybe some of the logistics around how this treatment would proceed, because access for the upper reservoirs, as upper reservoir is fairly tricky. It'll be fairly straightforward for the lower, because we'll have access through the intake pump house and boat ramp area. So happy to talk or review that in more detail for anyone. Also just a quick note on the application itself for the NOI. I just wanted to bring to your attention, there was the reservoirs are actually considered a outstanding resource water. So that box should actually be checked yes. So apologies for that, but it doesn't affect the project. This project doesn't involve any sort of dredging.
So if this doesn't work or doesn't work as well as you expect it to, would you then go back to the copper sulfate or reapply the aluminum?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess it would depend on the reason for why we think it's not working. The dose that's being recommended to be applied this year should be sufficient for at least having a very good season this year without any bloom problems. I'd be more concerned with something resurging next summer. Now, of course, right, like I can't predict like a major storm coming through, right? That's just if there's like extreme weather that loads up the reservoir, just things that we can't predict that could set us back a bit. If there, for whatever reason, if a bloom does occur in the reservoir this season, or subsequent seasons, there may need to be an emergency use of copper sulfate depending on how it's threatening the quality of the water coming in through the intake. The type of cyanobacteria that seems to be dominant in this system is a well-known saxitoxin producer, and like I said, the results last year were showing that it does in fact produce it, and it is something that we need to monitor closely, to protect public health.
Just so the current treatment plant we have, most treatment plants either have GAC for their primary filtration media, or they have DAP. Neither which our current treatment facility has. So the treatment facility cannot manage any saxitoxins that come into it. So everything must be managed within the reservoir. Talking to one of the prospective bidding companies, we have a bid opening on Thursday at 11. So after that, we'll know who the treatment contractor will be. The chemical tanks for the treatment at the upper would be stored in Newburyport, right next to the Plumber Spring Bridge, they would all have containment around them. And then most likely there will be a barge that would sit in the section 3B, and then a bigger barge that would go into 3A. They would be craned into the water because that is our best access. I would work with the contractor to limit the amount of fuel that's on the boat to just what they need for treatment on that day. And then for the lower section, talking to one of the prospective bidders, they feel that they would be able to bring in a tanker just to do the treatment for the day. So it would be a 2-compartment tanker. And that would be backed in over top of a secondary containment device for while the truck is sitting there during active treatment. There will be turbidity curtains installed by the intake. We will also shut down the treatment plant during active treatment in the lower section of the reservoir. I will add, Amesbury did this roughly 10 years ago, and they've had phenomenal success with it. So I'm trying to be optimistic about it. I know as the water superintendent, going through a season like we had last year is not sustainable for us.
Can I ask a question about that? So you said that last year we had to use this copper treatment on an emergency basis like 6 times, and that it's really not meant for that because somehow or other it's not good to use that. Could you explain that a little bit more? Like, what is it about the copper that isn't okay, and what makes the alum treatment better than that? And then in addition, like, why were we using the emergency copper treatment instead of alum for all this time? And how long have we been using it? Was it just last year, or have we been doing this copper thing for years?
Yeah, so it has to do with just Mass DEP regulations and what's allowed. So copper sulfate actually doesn't need to be permitted. So there's just like a couple page document that's more just like a courtesy notification that Pete fills out and sends to Mass DEP and when a copper sulfate treatment might be needed. So copper is toxic, and it's intended to target cyanobacteria, but it obviously affects other organisms as well. So there's non-target species that can be impacted by this, and then repeated treatments, the copper starts to accumulate in the sediments over time. And that can start to affect benthic organisms. And when you're actually using the copper sulfate, like I said, the copper itself acts to break open the cells. It kind of attacks those membranes, and that can release toxins that may be stored within the cells, and now they're outside the cells and in a an extracellular kind of dissolved form that then can migrate through the system and potentially into the intake that otherwise, would have been maybe potentially easier in particulate form to be filtered out through the facility as it's being processed. So it's not a sustainable option for those reasons. It's, as far as I'm aware, and that we have records for, the city started using copper sulfate in 2020 and has used it maybe 1 to 2, maybe 1 year was 3 times. But 2025 was kind of a game changer. 6 copper sulfate treatments throughout the summer was just, it's too much, and it wasn't. It was changing the resistance of those species in the water. So it's kind of like similar to like antibiotics, right? You're killing the bad stuff, but you're killing the good stuff too. And then we were getting these strains that were more resistant to the copper sulfate. So the blooms weren't responding as much until you needed to add or increase the dosage. So that is not a place that we want to be in at all. So the aluminum itself, I outlined that in the treatment plan in a lot more detail, as far as, there are risks with aluminum as well. The reason that we didn't apply an aluminum treatment last year is because it needs to go through a longer process like this, and it needs like a more well thought out plan, like you has been submitted with this NOI. And it's more efficient to and more effective to apply this early in the season, in springtime, again, trying to avoid like thick aquatic vegetation. You don't want to apply this directly on a bloom. You can, it has been used in that way to some extent, but you lose the kind of the efficacy of the flock that forms as you're adding the aluminum compounds to the water, and it's not an efficient use for the cost it takes to apply the aluminum to the water to treat it as like a flocculant to any sort of blooms. So you want the water clear, because you don't want to, aluminum is not really intended to treat the symptom of the issue, which is the cyanobacteria. It's trying to get at the root of the issue, which is there's just too many nutrients in the reservoirs. There's too much phosphorus, not only in the water column, but especially in zone 3, in the map that you're looking at. The bloom all last year really sat in zones, 3A, 3B. And that is where we had the most phosphorus-rich sediment from the coring we did last year. And that area will be targeted with the higher dose compared to the rest of the reservoirs.
Laura, as far as the concentration or the quantity that's put in, is this has to be exempt, right? Under the like Massachusetts contingency plan is, for water treatment. Is that the case? I mean, I would imagine that like certainly for copper, we must have exceeded like the reportable quantity. Can you
Yeah,
tell us
do
a
you
little
mean
bit about that?
exempt? Yeah, do you mean exempt, the copper sulfate being exempt?
Well, and the aluminum, I don't know what the reportable quantities of the aluminum are, but like the copper sulfate's probably pretty low, right? Like 10 pounds.
Yeah, I'm not sure the history for why, or at what I don't believe that there's a set restriction by Mass DEP other than the product that's used. For in the case of copper sulfate, the applicator is obligated to follow the manufacturer's dose limitations. So for instance, one of the limitations is you have to wait 14 days between applications per the manufacturer's instructions. So as far as I'm aware, Mass DEP defaults to that, and also doesn't have set restrictions on aluminum either. There are, of course, EPA-derived aluminum criteria that most states, including Massachusetts, has adopted. However, they do make exceptions for short-term additions like this, because we would temporarily exceed those EPA criteria for aluminum on a short-term basis. But there's these, exceedance exemptions that a lot of states will give for these aluminum treatments. the key for these treatments is to control pH. So that's why we split the doses out and in over multiple days. I've built in rest periods in there. We have robust monitoring in all these zones that you're seeing in the reservoirs the morning of treatments. And then during active treatment itself, during the day, we'd be in the, what we call the plume area. So after the barge has passed and applied the compounds, we're monitoring pH very closely to be sure that it maintains between 6 and 8, because outside of that range is where there's a risk for aluminum to become toxic. But these treatments have been done for 50 plus years. Many have been done specifically in Massachusetts, and the methodology of, that's been refined over time has made these treatments safe and effective. There's of course risk, but much of that risk is minimized, and that's all laid out in this plan. And we're constantly looking out for any evidence that there's any sort of, aquatic life distress. And someone like myself would be out there every day to assess that, and would be talking one-on-one with the applicator to make any adjustments in real time if there was any concerns related to that.
Okay.
Will the construction on the bridge be complete by the time you're?
So we'll be working with the bridge contractor. That's something Kim and I are working with. Most likely the final pavement will be held off until the alum treatment is done. So we will coordinate with the bridge contractor. That is in the scope that Kim and I have discussed. And once we have the applicator lined up, we can have more of a conversation with that to understand what their schedule is as well. One thing we did discuss is not opening the bridge. If they finish the bridge, we're not going to open the bridge until we're done with this, so we don't have to shut the bridge back down and then open it back up.
Yeah.
So there will be some coordination with the bridge contractor that takes place as well.
And is there any plan to try and reduce the amount of phosphorus that enters the system from surrounding land?
Currently I'm working with Laura to figure out where the most loading is coming from, and then work on trying to reduce that coming into the reservoir system. One thing I will add is I know that Paul Colby did do some copper treatments a long time ago, but they were basically 10 years apart, the former superintendent. So, it seems like ever since 2020, we've gotten into this cycle where we have so much nutrients in there, we just can't keep the bloom from dying down. And, historically, the original intake before the lower dam was built in the mid 40s, was right where 3B and Section 5 come together. So I don't know if that was, where a majority of the sediment was pushed when the construction was done. They are also old flooded cow pastures. So when they were flooded, their nutrients was never removed from them. So the average depth of the upper is 9 feet and the average depth of the lower is 7 feet. So one project that is also on the CIP plan at some point will be potentially what we call the Indian Hill project, which would allow us to have 3 different intakes and potentially allow us to remove the sediment in some of the troubled areas. But currently we can't do that with our setup.
There is a dairy farm not too far from the upper.
It's right on the other side of Section 1.
Yeah.
So yes.
I suspect they might have some of the phosphorus coming from there.
All right, anybody else? Oh, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was wondering what, what are the alternative methods of treatment that you considered, and why did you end up with this particular?
This particular
method?
treatment. So obviously copper's not working well for us. We've had to increase the dose. I know that DEP has had some concerns about it as well. And when it started to become resistant to it, we approached DEP and said, could we do an alum treatment? And they said, you have to go through this process. It's very well known to work in the Northeast region, and that's why we chose this. Laura can speak on the other option, which I believe is a hydrogen peroxide mix in the water, which is also applied through a barge treatment, but I believe it does not have as great a success rate as an alum treatment does.
Yeah, well, to the mention of hydrogen peroxide, that's more in line with like a copper sulfate treatment. You know, there's some benefits to it. You know, it doesn't have like a accumulating, you know, copper effect. The peroxide components, you know, hydrolyze in water to kind of neutral components fairly quickly, but the use of that is to kill a bloom, not go after the reason why there's a bloom in the first place. So aluminum is the one that's going to bind up the phosphorus, that key nutrient for cyanobacteria. So yeah, in the treatment plan, we do have a section called an alternatives analysis. There were a couple dozen alternatives that were considered, and they're all documented in a long table at the end and then summarized in a section. So most of them are not applicable for the reservoir for another, you know, a number of reasons that are laid out. Obviously, aluminum came out as the option with the most success in the time that we really need it before this next growing season. We also talked about the option for dredging in at least parts of this reservoir, but dredging is a much longer term project as far as design and execution that, you know, just wasn't time to do in just a few months' time. But you know, we do discuss it in the treatment plan as something that should at least be explored a bit more. It has been discussed in prior studies related to the reservoirs, even back several decades. I think folks knew that the reservoirs were pretty rich sediments from some of their former land uses, as Pete indicated, and that there might be a need for dredging down the road. Dredging would be a much longer term solution for these reservoirs, but like I said, it's much more difficult to permit, and it requires a lot more monitoring and sampling work and logistics, right? Depending on any contaminants that might be in that sediment and its potential for either reuse somewhere else or being treated as like a hazardous waste. And there's a lot, obviously, major costs associated with that. But we did discuss it, and it is ideally a longer term or sustainable option for the reservoirs. But in the meantime, we need the reservoirs are starting to get into this snowball cycle. Every summer for the last 5 years, the cyanobacteria blooms seem to be getting worse and worse every year. And this is a pattern that I see in a lot of water bodies that get caught in this cycle, and it doesn't get better until you treat the source of it, the nutrients. You know, every time that we have a severe bloom, those cells settle into the sediment and it becomes another releasable and readily available source of nutrients as it degrades and kind of resets over the winter and we head into the next season. And so we're already setting ourselves up for a hard summer based on, you know, how severe the blooms were last summer without cutting the nutrients off before the season begins.
As
Certainly
over
understand
time,
the
the
urgency.
holes got shallower, which might also be another reason for dredging.
I mean, I think over time, probably it's become a little shallower here and there, but there's something that's been to note from the bathymetric studies that we've done.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I can see the urgency here, but also just very curious about the phosphorus loading and where it's coming from. And do we have like, is it all from surface water releases or is it in the groundwater? Do we have any monitoring wells around the reservoirs? I mean, I know there's some
Yeah.
farms, but like, what's the mechanism for loading, I guess, into this
Yeah.
reservoir?
Yeah, so we do have a section in the plan that goes over the phosphorus source load. So we did model where the phosphorus is coming from into the reservoirs. And this is, I took a deeper dive into that modeling for this project, but it was building off of a watershed management plan that was developed for the reservoirs and published just last year. And yes, the majority of the nutrients are coming from the watershed. There is a decent amount of agriculture in this watershed, scattered throughout the watershed, but then also in proximity to the reservoirs itself for some more direct runoff. That I know Pete and his predecessors have really tried to work with farmers in the watershed to to assist them in any way possible with trying to manage nutrients that are coming off their land. So obviously there's minimal septic systems. I think we identified possibility of maybe 3 systems within 250 to 300 feet of the reservoirs itself. Either there's no homes within that border or it's sewered, but there is the possibility of with aging infrastructure, some leaky sewer lines that weren't included or incorporated into the modeling estimate, but that is a possibility as well. So most of it is certainly coming from the watershed itself and some of those land uses. So 9% of the watershed is agriculture, and we estimate that it's contributing 36% of the phosphorus load. All the other developed areas in the watershed outside of agriculture cover 18% of the watershed, and they contribute 56% of the load. So so and that watershed management plan, it details out specific sites that some engineers had recommended be addressed to help reduce that nutrient runoff. And I know that Pete and folks before him were starting to really work those out and try to find some funding. And it's certainly something that was emphasized in this treatment plan, and something that I always recommend and strongly encourage with these alum treatments as well is, when we're treating, in this case, the internal phosphorus load to a water body, all that phosphorus came from the watershed at some point. And in this case, some of these are flooded areas and former agricultural fields that are contributing to some of that legacy load. But there's still a lot of current loading that's happening, and that will build up in the sediments over time after this treatment. So definitely something to keep in mind. It's just obviously very difficult, right? With working with private landowners and making sort of impactful change in a short amount of time, which is why we need to kind of lean on these types of management options like alum treatments.
So I'll add that, the mayor's office is currently in talks, with West Newbury, because we have an intermunicipal agreement with them, so something we were trying to redo, in a water management type plan would be part of that intermunicipal agreement. A majority of our watershed does sit in West Newbury. So, the watershed is around 2,800 acres of land, so it's a big area.
Do you know if it's also in the groundwater, or is it's basically all sheet runoff or any point sources, or is it just, you think it's just runoff from the land?
Yeah, the majority of it's runoff. There's no point sources that I'm aware of. But certainly groundwater is an influence. The modeling approach that we took wraps the groundwater base flow and the runoff components together, at least how I summarized it. So it's part of that watershed load.
Yeah, I'll add that our staff, during heavy rain events goes out and does tributary sampling, and we do notice an influx of phosphorus during heavy rain events, so.
Okay, anybody else? I am not hearing anybody. Are there any comments from the public? Raise your hand if so. Okay, what do we want to do?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Julie Goffredson,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
Reese Champitti,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, thank you for, we're gonna go, yeah, we're gonna go right into the order conditions. Is that what we're
Yeah.
doing? Yeah,
I think so.
okay. So let's do that. Do we have any special conditions for this?
I don't remember us discussing any special conditions. I'm just wondering, maybe Kelsey, can you remind us if in the notice of intent, or the applicant can remind us if in the notice of intent, do they specify any monitoring, anything that we need to be aware of after the treatment in terms of impacts that might need to be addressed or remediated afterwards? Do they talk about that, or should we make special conditions?
I know that there is a section dedicated to monitoring in the alum treatment plan, but off the top of my head, I don't know if I'd be able to pull up the highlights. But Laura, I don't know if you could maybe give just like a high level summary.
Yeah. So I lay out a fairly comprehensive monitoring plan in the plan. PDF page 36, Kelsey, since you're navigating to it. It's just a summary table. There's a narrative before that table that helps explain it. But in the map you saw earlier, there were yellow triangles on that map, and those are monitoring stations that will be utilized. So we'll have a couple monitoring events before treatment, so we can establish a baseline at all of those sites. And then during the active treatment, which, like I said, should occur over a 2-week period in May, city staff will be going out every morning to collect the parameters you see here. So it's basic water quality parameters. The ones you see coded in pink are the ones that are directly affected because of the treatment itself, right? So the pH and turbidity, those are things that we're specifically looking for in the pH. We want to stay within a certain range during the active treatment. So someone like myself, who's able to assess, right, the safety of the treatment as proceeding, I will be out there making sure that the pH is maintaining itself during the treatment, and then we'll be collecting samples that are sent to a laboratory for the other parameters that you see listed here, most especially the total aluminum that will then compare to EPA criteria, knowing that the first sample will likely exceed, but what we want to see is a very quick recovery of the system. Within a 24-hour period, those aluminum concentrations should be within the EPA criteria and then should continue to decline at a steady rate for all the post-treatment sampling. And then you'll see the green highlighted ones are more the biological response. So we'll also be taking samples and looking at the plankton. So, what the algae species are, that includes cyanobacteria, and also what we call zooplankton. So those are the microorganisms that eat the algae. And we'll be assessing changes in those communities over the course of the season. After the treatment itself, we'll switch to monthly monitoring from about June through October. Once the pink parameters return to baseline, we can stop sampling for those, but all the other parameters are kind of the baseline water quality indicators that are part of the city's normal sampling plan anyways. Those will continue no matter what. And then most importantly, the visual assessments that'll be done throughout this entire season, most especially obviously on active treatment days by myself and city staff, and documenting anything that looks suspicious. If there's distressed animals, usually there's really nothing much that you see. Occasionally, if there's small smelt, you might, because they're just more sensitive, you might see maybe a dozen that pop up at the surface as after maybe a recent pass, but it's very minimal. And if it were to be more than, say, a dozen, that's when I would alert the applicator, and we'd either modify the dosage that's applied or stop treatment for the day and reassess. So all of those levers are kind of instilled within this monitoring plan, and the expectations for someone like myself and the applicator to be sure that this is done in a safe manner. And then it's written in here as well that all this data that's collected will be summarized in a final report and submitted to the Conservation Commission for review. If there is anything that does pop up that, if on the off chance there was an ecological issue, we would certainly alert the Conservation Commission right away and not wait until the end of the season with the final report.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm assuming we don't need any special conditions. Is this good enough for folks?
I think that's our standard ones.
Yeah, things like no I mean, you're just using barges, and so I think no refueling of vehicles or equipment within buffer zones and things like that. Those are in our standard conditions. That's pretty good. Do we want to refer to this monitoring plan and just reiterate as a special condition that if any parameters of the monitoring are exceeded, or any concerns arise with regard to water quality or aquatic health or public health, that the commission would be notified immediately. City and the commission would be notified immediately. Obviously, the city would know. I don't know if we even need to do that, but
Yeah.
I think she said that if something happens, that we'd be notified, so I don't know that we need a special condition, didn't hurt to have it in there, but.
okay. As long as it says it somewhere in the notice of intent.
Okay. All right then. Can I get a motion then?
I'll make a motion to issue the order of conditions for the study or
Allen treatment.
alum treatment.
Second,
All right, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes,
Dan Warshaw,
yes.
Julie Gottfredson,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Jana Daisley,
Yes.
Reese Champetti,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
You too. All right, next item is 13 Hale Street, Samul Shah, Palmer Capital Corp.
Yeah, Joppa, they're both in the room here in person. So I'll hand it over quickly. I think several commission members have been to 13 Hale Street a month or two ago. They received an unrelated certificate of compliance. Now is proposed a battery energy storage system. We recently issued an RDA for a battery storage system at 23 Low Street. This is an unrelated project, but I just bring that up because we have an idea of what the project looks like, and there are some wetlands on site, but I think I'll let you guys kind of describe where that's going on, and I'll bring up the most recent site plan.
Thanks, Kelsey. Just to introduce myself, my name is Justine Fox. I'm a wetland scientist with Williams and Sparagus LLC. We have Sunil Shah here as well from Palmer Corporation. I'll just wait till Kelsey gets the plan up.
Okay. I know you submitted some more recent tree documents, so if you want to go through those, do that. But for those of us who have been on site, I can pull up some site photos as well from our previous site visit. Our most recent one was pretty covered in snow, but there's
that's why we don't do site visits.
yeah, Phragmites type of wetlands in the rear and along the sides. There's a paved kind of driveway here, and this little area is like a gravel apron. But yeah, I'll let you guys talk through this.
Sure. So just to speak to the wetland resource areas in question, they pretty much surround the structures on this property. If you're familiar with site plans that were approved for this property in the past, there was not previously a wetland delineated on the western side of the property. I did get some pretty obvious hydric soils in there, and looking at old plans from the site, that area was designed as a swale, so it makes sense that a wetland would have formed there over time as water moved towards the swale. There was also stormwater basins constructed that are labeled as shallow marsh B and shallow marsh A that have been delineated as wetland as a part of this application. They've pretty much taken over with wetland vegetation at this point, which might be more obvious in the photos that Kelsey took at the prior site inspection. In terms of what we are proposing within the buffer zone to these resource areas, it is approximately 1,030 square feet of impervious surface, with the battery energy storage system, which will be placed on concrete slabs. as well as on the north and south sides of the slabs, there's going to be infiltration trenches to prevent standing water around the system and slow any stormwater flow before it would reach wetland resource areas. Like Kelsey mentioned, it is proposed entirely on an existing gravel surface. No vegetation is proposed to be removed within the buffer zone for the installation of the system. And then underground electrical wires are proposed from the system, kind of up the driveway in front of the church structure, and towards the entrance, where they will surface, and 4 new utility poles are proposed adjacent to the wetland resource areas near the entrance to the site before they join existing infrastructure in Hale Street. The only vegetation we were potentially concerned about was tree kind of bright. Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That I circled in red near the street. Just that's where the overhead wires will be no longer under the ground and potentially impacting the branches on that tree. Not exactly sure how much, but I did identify this tree as a green ash tree, and unfortunately there was evidence of the invasive emerald ash borer in the canopy already, which is typically fatal for this type of tree within a few years of initial infestation from this beetle. So chances are this tree will continue to decline anyways, and that is, like I said, the only wetland vegetation we would be concerned about potentially disrupting as a part of this proposal.
So currently the electrical is underground?
So we're proposing underground electrical coming from the system. And then there's existing infrastructure above ground in Hale Street that it would be connecting to.
Okay, so currently going to the church, there are no poles. Or are there?
There are,
There are
You
poles on the west side of the property. You can kind of see it a little bit in the,
Right here.
right
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Okay. So why not use those poles?
Those poles are not adequately sized, and the wires are not adequately sized. We need to tie into the wires in the street.
Okay.
yes, I will just add that as of this afternoon, we do have a DEP file number. And the planning board had the stormwater report go to peer review. And we got response back from Phil Christensen, and he agreed that the project as designed will not have any measurable stormwater impact on the surrounding area. The planning board also had a condition for maintaining the system, and that the gravel perimeter around the system shall be clear of vegetation and other obstructions at all times, and access to the site and the system, including the fire department turnaround, shall be kept clear of snow and vehicles, and no parking signs shall be posted in these areas. So we don't have that shown on the plan currently, but that's a condition that the planning board required.
I was just gonna bring, I don't know if everyone got a chance to read the civil engineering, and it's not completely wetlands related, but it kind of goes through some more of the specifications of what the battery packs actually look like. Are they, maybe is each unit kind of the size of like a shipping container?
Exactly.
Okay.
If we go, yeah, back to the plan. So the underground electrical looks like it's in the 25-foot no disturb zone.
It is for portions of the site near the, not where it comes out of the system. The whole thing is proposed within the buffer zone, as the whole property is within the 100-foot buffer zone to the bordering vegetated wetlands that surround it. But if you see on the west side of the system, there's a line with an E in the middle of the dashes, and that is the proposed underground electrical wires. So it's outside of the 25 until you get towards the property's frontage with Hale Street, where unfortunately there was no option outside of the 25-foot no disturbance zone. So we just did our best to try and keep it out of the wetland resource areas themselves on that side of the property.
This is where the intersection happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't exactly see where the underground is, which,
It's I know it's small on the screen, but the line with the capital E's, that's where the underground is proposed.
okay, but there's a note to go up to the other side.
Towards the battery.
No, just directly north,
Oh, I see.
whatever. And then scroll so that, no, the other way.
Underground.
There's a note there that says underground electric.
Oh, that's existing infrastructure.
Okay,
I think they know this, I think, is the shortest distance between the battery units and the actual wetland boundary, and it's just over 25 feet. So it's outside of that 25 foot.
okay, so let's go down and follow the underground electric. Which line that?
It's this.
That one, okay.
With the E's in it.
Okay, let's follow it all the way to the poles.
Still underground in front of the church.
Yeah,
And now we're kind of in the driveway and there's those 4 circles to the east of the entrance drive, and that's where it will surface, and the 4 proposed utility poles are along the entrance driveway before it will connect with the existing infrastructure in Hale Street.
okay, so those are in the wetlands or certainly within the 25-foot no disturb zone.
That's correct.
The poles themselves.
Yeah, we did our best to keep them out of the wetland resource area, but unfortunately it borders the driveway on both sides.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a feasible location outside of the 25 for those poles.
So typically, if you're doing work in the 25-foot no disturb zone, we would ask you to apply for variance. Admittedly, this is fairly minor, but that is our procedure.
Yeah, we haven't
Yeah,
submitted that as a thing.
That is generally what we would do. And there's certainly I would think there's a public interest in this as well. Having a battery pack sitting there for electrical service, but what do others think?
Yeah, I think we need to follow our process and have you apply for a variance, otherwise we get in trouble with other not doing that.
Understood.
Yeah, it has to, we'd have to issue a variance in this case. Because it does impact the 25 no disturb, but it is minimal impact and there is public interest, so it should be straightforward.
Be the problem.
Can you,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was just wondering, have you quantified like the square footage and of the impact within the 25-foot no disturb? Do we have like anything specifically documented on that? And in terms of how much vegetation is lost, etc.?
So the 4 utility poles would be the only structure going directly into the 25-foot no disturbance zone. Well, do you know the diameter typically of the poles?
They're probably 8 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
But the the drawings actually do show the underground rising up into the last pole. We could actually move that last pole out of the 25-foot wetland, so the only impact would be the 2 poles. We could move the last pole out of the 25, so there'd only be 2 poles within the buffer.
Okay.
That would work.
Yeah, and also Kelsey, I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to remember the exceptions, what's in the exceptions and exemptions in 25-foot no disturb. I don't know if utility, I know that we have some sort of public utility exceptions and exemptions, but that might not be for the 25-foot no disturb. It may just be for outer parts of the buffer zone but that's something to look into before we require a variance for this, just to make sure that there isn't some reason why this could be accepted.
I agree. I haven't looked into that for this particular project, but I think, let me double check that to see if the definition of utility is kind of like would encompass this before with you about that.
But I think if you move that fourth pole so that the underground isn't in the 25-foot duster, that would make me feel better.
Yeah, and then
Always like that.
in terms of the square footage that the other poles take up in the 25-foot no disturbance zone, they're either going to be put in a space maintained as lawn or within the drive itself. So no native vegetation is being disrupted with the ground disturbance near the poles.
Yeah. And actually, I'm just also thinking of an exception, which is that given that this entire site is in buffer zone, I believe because of that, they are actually allowed to work within the 25-foot no disturb, with mitigation, etc. That's just another, we might just want to look to the regulations and call that exception out specifically. In this case, I believe that that is applicable.
Yeah, that's a good point. My apologies for not thinking of that. It's kind of a rarely used exception, but because so much of the site is in buffer zone, there's like an exception. So I'll check on that to see what might apply. So thanks for bringing that up.
Sure.
So I guess, is there any more questions while we have this in front of us today?
Yeah, I had a question about, could you go actually just move over to the actual pad, Kelsey?
Sure. Yeah.
So just a couple questions for constructing the pad. Do you need to do any dewatering? And if so, how would you manage the water and the excavation itself? And also, what is this, the 2 proposed stone-filled trenches for groundwater recharge? What is that for?
So Simul can speak more to the design of the system itself, but to my knowledge, it's just placed on top of concrete pads, and there's not a lot of ground disturbance that occurs with the system itself. The trenches on either side, the concrete pads are going to be pitched towards those slightly. So any stormwater that lands on the system will immediately go into those trenches, and the crushed stone in the trenches will infiltrate that water or slow it down. So it's not going to be standing around the system or running off immediately into the nearby wetland resource areas.
Okay, so this is really like a slab on grade, and you're not going into the ground.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay.
And we didn't show a dewatering detail on the plan. The only true ground disturbance would be the infiltration trenches, digging those, but those are intended to infiltrate water themselves, and crushed stone will be added.
So if the concrete is
Groundwater infiltration or for actual stormwater or
stormwater?
Okay. So it's stormwater that's just going to go into the ground, you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, it'll recharge and slow down in those
Yeah.
infiltration trenches.
Forgot what my question was. Oh, the concrete pad just sitting on the ground, won't there be frost heaves? Unless there's some digging and putting something in there that will support it.
We're gonna do some geotech investigation, but typically we've just put it on the ground.
And it is existing gravel.
Right, but you got a pretty high water table out there.
There is, yes.
And there's a lot of clay. So you might want to look into that before you finalize that.
Yeah, is that something that I mean, obviously, we can't proceed with building until we do a geotech investigation.
Right.
I've seen some sites that we've, done some ground improvements on, but, is that a condition for the commission to?
Well, I guess
Actually,
if you're really gonna have to dig down deeply in order to keep the pad from moving around with the frost, I guess we'd like to
Yeah.
not a condition, but, you're gonna do more digging than we think you're going to do, we need to know that.
With ground improvements, it's basically pounding some stone into the ground rather than actually digging.
Okay. Never heard of that, but
Could you repeat that, please? I didn't get that.
I was mentioning that in some sites, we've seen the soil conditions where we've had to do some ground improvements, and that basically involves pile driving stone into the ground to kind of stiffen the ground. That's to deal with the clay, if there's a lot of movement in the ground. It really depends. I mean, it's very site specific, and how much of that has to be done and what area it has to be done in. And take that a step further, it's not just the area underneath the pad, it's also the areas around the pad are also drive lanes for fork trucks, so those can't sink into the ground either. We don't want those damaging the ground either. So we'll be doing a geotech of the entire fenced in area. A geotech analysis.
well, there is a lot of clay out there, so.
I guess would it be possible to condition that we come back before the commission if more ground disturbance is required than anticipated after the geotechnical survey?
Yes.
Would that make sense? Okay.
Okay, then the tree out by that may or may not be affected by what you're doing, but it's probably gonna die anyway.
Yes, unfortunately.
Would you be willing to replace that with something that would survive?
Absolutely, yeah. And we can put it farther back into the wetland and
Yeah.
make sure it won't interfere with overhead power lines.
Yeah.
A native wetland species as well.
Yeah. In fact, any native vegetation you want to put around there is acceptable. So, you're leasing this land, I presume, from the church, you don't.
Correct.
So, we're probably looking at a continuance, correct?
I think so, to get a plan that shows the pole and the change in the.
And also to confirm whether variance is.
Yeah, just follow up with you to take a look at our variance regs and then whether any of our exceptions might apply in this case, so we can follow up on that.
Okay, great. And we'll edit the plan as necessary based on that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right then, are we all set for now? Anybody else? Okay, anybody from the public have any comments? Raise your hand if so. Okay, I don't see anybody, so we want to go to March 17th for this? For the continuance?
As long as that gives enough time on your end, Kelsey, to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can communicate if we need another continuance, if we need more time to update the plan or anything.
Sure, okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, can I get a motion for continuance?
Motion to continue to March 17th.
Second.
All right, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Julie Godfredson,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
Reese Champitti,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next is 082nd Street, Prince Botang and Skog and Stone Sauna Company.
So I believe we have Josh on Zoom. Just before tonight's meeting started, Scott and Stone did submit a new document, so I'm going to bring that up. But they're aware that neither myself or the commission has had the chance to review it yet.
Yeah, I'm
It's,
here, Kelsey. This is Josh.
Hi, Josh. Thanks. These were the follow-up requests the commission had made at the last meeting, and I sent to Josh and Prince via email late last week.
Yep. Yeah, and happy to talk through any of these things. In general, we just tried to answer your questions and concerns from last time, in enough detail and hopefully with enough clarity that it's clear kind of what contingency plans we have in different circumstances.
Okay. We could go over this now. I don't know how long is the document?
It's a couple pages.
Okay. It's just a couple pages. Okay.
Yeah, there were just 3 or 4 topics. Like duration of the sauna is basically 180 days, so keeping it under 6 months. Our agreement with George and his sons at Captain's.
Okay. Do we want to look at this and get back to Kelsey with any comments, or do we want to look at this now?
I think I'd like to look at it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, we're gonna get you're gonna get a continuance anyways. So this way we can go over the document. If we have any clarifications we want or additions, folks can send that to Kelsey and communicate to you guys. But I would prefer to go over the document myself too and see if it answers my questions instead of going through it all right now.
And we should kind of promise to do that within the next 2 or 3 days so that if we have any comments, you have time to address them before the next meeting.
Yes. So is that okay with folks?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I definitely would prefer to just have a chance to read this at my own pace and have some time to digest it.
Okay.
I mean, that's fine with us. I apologize for not getting it over before today. If for the next meeting, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said you could blame Kelsey for extending her vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess a couple of thoughts. One is, happy to answer any questions in the meantime. So as you guys read this in the next few days, feel free to reach out to us directly. We're happy to either answer it immediately or find the answer or come up with an appropriate answer. And then secondarily, if we're getting a continuance to the next meeting, and it's helpful to you, we can provide that. We will try our best to provide the document at a time early enough that you can pre-read for the next meeting.
That would be good. All right. So why don't we do the continuance?
Motion to continue to March 17th.
Second.
All right. Roll call. Steve Moore.
Yes.
Dan Warshall.
Yes.
Julie Godfredson.
Yes.
Barb Riley.
Yes.
Janet Daisley.
Yes.
Reese Champitti.
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, guys, thank you. We'll go over this and we'll get Kelsey any questions we have.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. That document isn't on OpenGov yet, but I will email it to all of you tomorrow and also get it uploaded to their RDA application on OpenGov.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Okay, on to our business meeting. We need to approve the meeting minutes of February 17th, 2026. Does anybody have any comments or questions or changes?
Motion to approve meeting minutes of 2/17/2026.
Second?
All right, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Julie Gottfredson,
Yes.
Barb Riley.
Yes.
Did you say yes, Barb?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm really far away from you right now. Janet Daisley,
Yes.
Reese Champitti,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All righty, do we have any updates? I don't have any updates other than the lake that I'm on here, Lake Chapala. Pretty much looks like the Artichoke Reservoir and needing a massive alum treatment.
Really?
It's the largest, it's Lake Chapala. It's the largest lake in Mexico, and look at it on Google Maps. There was so much algae in that thing, and people. It's the water supply for Guadalajara. But we saw people swimming in it today, and people are always fishing in it, and it's interesting. That's my update. Kelsey, you got anything?
I see Andy has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I feel remiss if I didn't mention something tonight, just given that the commission's meeting. Some of you, I think, already recall this, but I just wanted to show briefly. There's a house on the island that we have to demolish, you may recall.
Okay.
This is the so-called FEMA buyout, or that's the phrasing that some of us have used to refer to that hazard mitigation program. At any rate, I just wanted to let you guys know we filed a NOI with the commission, but we're also having a very difficult time, without going down the rabbit hole, we're having a difficult time with FEMA and MEMA over the bureaucracies, and so they're pressing us to have the demolition done in short order. At any rate, for those of you who may not be familiar with the contents of this project, this is the house at the end of 975th Street. There's a couple of photographs here of the house, but just to give you an idea of, it's a sort of a cabin that's up on top of CMU block walls that form what's essentially an above ground basement. So they have the sort of you walk in here, you're in the basement level that's above grade, CMU block walls, and they just sort of have this cabin on top of it. And at any rate, this is the only house that's left after the original three to be demolished. We've purchased this property. We have to demolish the house. The homeowner's been moved, but we're trying to coordinate with a variety of different things that, like utility company, disconnects and verifications and all that kind of stuff. But basically, this is the house that would be coming down. And essentially, what happens is it gets restored to dune grass and natural environment. So I just blocked off the other few houses that were not part of this work here. They dropped out of the program, so to speak. So at any rate, I wanted to let you know about that just because that's coming along pretty quickly based on the multiple constraints we have on this project. But if you have any questions, let me know. I think some of you are already familiar with that particular project from a prior dialogue or two.
So, Andy, did you get the approvals to move forward with the demolition?
We got approvals to go ahead. However, they're being difficult on the time frame.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to walk delicately there just because of the difficulties there. Some of the MEMA folks are a little bit concerned because of the changes at the federal government level that, and I imagine this has something to do with maybe, whether they would look favorably on Massachusetts or something, but they don't necessarily want to tinker with prior approvals too much. So we're trying to just follow along with as best we can what they're expecting us to do. So anyway, Kelsey and I will circle back. We're going to talk about this tomorrow morning. We'll circle back with you, but it's a relatively straightforward project. The house demolition itself, after they do a couple of interior removal disconnect type things, is only expected to take about a day or two, including the removal of the material from the site, because it's only, you can wreck it pretty quickly. At any rate, that's the scope of the project.
During this past storm, the last like bomb cyclone that we had, I guess it was about a week and a half ago, or it was last Monday. How did Plum Island fare? I haven't been out there to see what area. Yeah, what happened?
Oh, I mean, I did see water getting up. The house is on the spill tonight. You should remember the address by now off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But around that area there at the end of 75th, you can see the water getting up high around that area, on the water side, but not necessarily sort of coming over the top and I think at this point we probably still have buried underneath there's probably some of those choir bags are still there. So I don't know, between the fences that are there that are at least seem to be doing a good job of collecting sand. I do think it'd be better if we could plant some more dew grasses, but that might help. But it looked okay to me. There was an expanse of beach, and it wasn't like a sharp slope or anything like that.
Good. That's great to know.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andy. We will be looking forward to that. Do we have anything else?
Yeah, I had, actually, I sent Kelsey an email, which you may have missed, and jumping around about who could vote and not vote on like 5 Basin Street. Do we actually have a quorum of people who attended enough meetings to, like, Reese can't vote on it?
That's correct.
And actually, he can't vote on that
And
last just talked.
Sorry, this is Andy just jumping in. I defer you all. I didn't wasn't aware that was going to be discussed as a subject matter, but we could always follow up with the applicant and re-advertise, perhaps, if there's some concern about having continuity with members. There's been an occasion or two with the planning board or ZBA, at least, where that kind of thing has happened based on the extension of time, and so moving of members. So it might be something where we could easily rectify it that way if there's a problem with the members that are actually available for a point of continuity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how other than going through meeting notes.
The rule is that you're allowed to miss one meeting.
And you have to listen to the recording.
Right. So I'd have to go back and kind of see who was in attendance at each meeting. But like Andy said, if we ran into an issue where that left us without a quorum, then we could re-advertise.
I think if we check into those dates tomorrow and just verify, we could decide right away whether or not we should expedite an advertisement, just to sort of bridge that gap either way. But we can check tomorrow and find out whether that is in fact necessary or whether or not it's doable with what we have right now.
Because I think you have to count me out as well, because I was not a commissioner when this thing started a year ago. So actually,
I think
I
think we probably should, based on what I'm seeing here. But advertising.
They should do that, because I know Janet's missed several meetings. And that would leave us maybe 3 of us, maybe Barb and Steve, but it would be really good for them to just re-advertise.
But they would also have to redo their whole presentation.
They could do it briefer though, by just uploading the materials and then speaking briefer to it.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. Knowing the people involved, there won't be.
Well, thanks for raising it. I'll work with Andy tomorrow, maybe start the process and let Tom and Lisa know, representing the applicant, that they would need to kind of represent maybe at a high level.
And I don't know if any of the other current applications we have before us.
5 Basin is definitely the longest running. I don't think there's an issue for the others, but I will double check.
Okay. I would hate for us to be here next week and say, oops, we can't.
No, definitely. Need to be preventative.
Okay. Anything else? I'll take another motion.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Good night, folks.
Thanks. Night. Night.
Good night.
Yeah.